wanted to find out because I haven't chatted with you in a while. So
Yeah.
I want to check in to see how you're doing.
Uh, Generally, well. I uh, I had my second vaccine shot on Friday, so I'm a little less than 2 weeks away from being completely free. So I've already booked or blocked a week in May to go hang out with a longtime buddy of mine. We're gonna go up to the mountains and just go have a good time, hike, fish, and I haven't seen him since before the pandemic, so we're gonna have a good time.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
Looking
that's
forward to
super.
the freedom.
Yeah, totally. I think Destiny, you just got your shots, right?
Yes, I got both rounds. I got the Pfizer. I'm good. I think, and like tomorrow, I'm fully vaccinated because it'll be 2 weeks after the fact.
Oh,
So
congratulations! Yeah, it's got to be a
thank
good feeling.
you. It is good.
Uh,
It feels nice.
Yeah. I love seeing like all the social media posts going out. People are like showing pictures, like getting their shot. It's like freedom is coming. So it's really cool. It's
Yes.
awesome.
I was just talking to an Experian colleague based in Singapore, and we are talking about how well the vaccination process is going in the U.S. It really we might have started off a little clunky, but I'm sure Destiny, your experience was probably similar to mine. It's very efficient. I mean, I couldn't believe how efficient the process is in both cases for my shot went. Um, and it seemed like the number of people that were getting vaccinated. I mean, in both cases, lots of people at the same time, but I never felt like I had to wait. Like it just went fast, just kind of blazed right through. So I told him, I said, I hate to be prideful, but it's kind of like when the U.S. puts its mind to something and says, we're going to make this happen. It's really impressive. It's like American ingenuity at work. It was a lot of fun to experience that firsthand.
Definitely. It's like it's everything is really efficient around here, and I also read like a statistic and it said something about 1 in 3 adults are like vaccinated right now,
Oh
which is
yeah,
like
yeah.
crazy. That was a recent stat. I mean, hey, the line is barely even there. Like it's just they've got everything ready to go. Looks like things are going to just start streamlining and everything's picking up, and we're just ready for things to start getting back to normal. That's the
Yeah,
bottom line.
I'm really impressed. It's just it exceeded my expectations about how the process was gonna go.
100%.
So,
Same here.
Well, I'm really excited for you, Eric, and that's really good news. And yeah, I've been feeling like it's been great seeing, here in Southern California, seeing stores opening back up. I'm seeing people getting back into sports as I ride my bike all over the place, and I've been seeing like people playing soccer and softball, and I'm like, oh, it's things are coming back. Like it's so exciting. So I'm happy to hear that you're getting your vaccines all that taken care of. I'm in line, so I'll be getting mine hopefully very, very soon. But I wanted to see, Eric, about I wanted to ask you about how maybe work projects have evolved for you. Because I remember we chatted right at the very beginning of COVID-19 about working with your teams as you transitioned from corporate office work environments to remote working. And I was wondering, like, has anything evolved for you as far as projects and working with your teams over the last year?
so, I also took more responsibilities in the company as well. So as you recall, I think the last time we talked, I managed our data labs, which I still do, and those are there are four of them, and they're spread around the globe. And then about almost 7 months ago, I also took responsibility for our identity and fraud business globally, which has team members, I think, in about 10 countries right now. And
Wow.
that, I will say that the dynamics of COVID are different country by country. Like if you're paying attention to what's happening right now, countries like Brazil and India, where I have teammates, uh, they're really right now their rate of hospitalization, rate of death are peaking. So while here in the U.S. things are actually seeming to turn the corner, and we're really excited about returning back to a new normal, those countries are still struggling a bit. In fact, they kind of got a wave. It's like a wave that just overwhelmed them right now. So it's kind of sad to see that.
Mm.
But having said that, it really, because of that, when you're working with teams that are used to working with other team members in other countries, I think, if I would say anything's different versus a year ago when it was a real scramble, hey, we're all leaving the office, we're all going to work from home, we're going to change our processes and how we think and how we meet. And I mean, it was quite an experience. But I think there's like things like empathy that I think there's been a bit of, I'll call it the great paradox, right? So we're in less proximity to each other. We're communicating electronically, but because we've all had this shared experience, even cross culture, cross country, I know there's far more empathy and a feeling of connection to each other than we had a year ago. So that's something that, coming out of it, hopefully that's a feeling or a new connection that we'll be able to leverage in a positive and productive way, because I think when people do feel that they share things in common, there's that connection, then when it comes time to engage, I'll say in more challenging things, which we're always, in business, you're always faced with new challenges. You might work better together. Might actually work better together. So we'll call it the great paradox, because you wouldn't think that in a time when we're all working from our homes digitally that we might be able to actually connect in a stronger way to each other.
Yeah. And I'm wondering like how you are like leading with empathy. I mean, managing people in 10 different countries, and each country, like you just mentioned, are going through different things, especially in response to COVID-19. And you just mentioned like how it's skyrocketing in certain regions, and you're trying to be very sensitive to your teammates in those regions. How are you kind of like staying like engaged with those teams and making sure that they're doing okay? Because you're like having to lead a huge business for Experian.
Yeah, it requires a lot more communication and more than you might typically. You almost have to swing the pendulum in a different direction. And the team that we have in the global IDNF group, I had babka. I don't know if you're familiar with a babka. It's like a sweet pastry bread that is from. I'm Jewish, so it's like a Jewish pastry kind of thing, and so I had babkas shipped from a famous bakery in Brooklyn, to everybody's home, and then we just had
Oh
a
wow!
coffee and babka meeting where we just hung out,
Oh, how cool!
and we really weren't really talking about business. Yeah, it was more about what's going on in your life kind of thing. Now that's a lot of people to have on a call like that, so you don't get as much participation as you'd hope for. But I can tell you that the response from everyone was extremely positive, because they sat there and they went, "Wow, Experian actually." That's a very thoughtful thing. Everybody likes sweets, and in this case, it was something that they could share with their friends or their family. And then the fact that we were all having a coffee or a tea plus something sweet to eat, just it just changed it. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you wouldn't normally do, but in this kind of environment, it just helps people bond a bit, feel feel more closer to and connected to each other. So.
That's amazing. And like, what type of response, like, what type of feedback did you get after that event?
Very strong. In fact, people were like, "Gosh, I had no idea that this could be so much fun. Can we do it again?" So actually, I don't know when your recording's going out, but we're sending out. I discovered it's a bakery in Chicago, and they're a combination of donuts and cookies. It's a cookie that looks like a donut. So the
Oh my gosh!
outsides of it are like crispy, and the middle whole part is a little crispy, and then inside it's a bit doughy. And they make chocolate chip cookies that way. They make all different kind of cookies that way. They even make gluten-free cookies because we have some people on the team that have gluten allergies. So this we learned with the babka. So so we're having those shipped to a dozen of these donut cookie things, which are
Amazing.
supposed to be, you know, kind of like quite the hot item right now.
Sounds like
Yeah.
a dream come true.
So it's like those kinds of things. The expense of it really isn't that much. It really isn't that much. I think in this case, it boils down to like $20 a person. I mean, maybe that sounds like a lot. I don't know. But to me, what you get back in return is, you know, an employee base that is like, wow, this is a cool place. You know, they care about me. They're giving me stuff. We're talking about, you know, just what's going on in life. They actually are asking me like, how are things with the kids, you know? So it just changes the dialogue, and you know, when we do see each other, I think, you know, just make it that, you know, we have those shared experiences that we can reflect on and go, yeah, well, even when times were tough, we still had a good time together. We still enjoyed each other's company. So it's all positive.
Yes, it's like you're forming community around the world.
Yeah,
And it just
exactly.
makes
It
it a
gets
better
tricky. Like the
place.
people in Bulgaria, I don't have we don't know how to get baked goods into Bulgaria. I guess that's a shipping challenge for bakeries in the U.S. or something. So we have some of these, you know, I will call them national challenges. So in those cases, in this first run, we just sent them gift cards that they could go and buy their own baked goods. We don't like that. None of us on our management team like that because it's that's no fun. That's no fun. It's more fun to get the actual package. So this time around, we're trying to figure out how we overcome that one.
I,
It's funny; these are not the logistical challenges we would typically engage in at Experian.
so when this podcast goes out, everyone's going to want to join your team now, Eric.
That's the whole idea. You know, recruiting is going to get more challenging when the pandemic abates. So, you know, I think I read a McKinsey research report that said 40% of all working adults in the U.S. are going to be looking for their next gig once the pandemic's over. So I had to use every trick in the book to make sure that our team is retained and excited and happy to be here.
Yes, like the way that your team feels around the world. So that's amazing what you're doing. And I don't really see a lot of leaders doing that. Like, investing in everyone, no matter like what, seniority level they are. It's just forming that sense of community, looking at everyone as if they contribute the same importance in the team. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, Eric, about your transition to your expanded role, now taking on the identity and fraud business. When you had that opportunity, what pushed you over to do that? Because you already have huge responsibilities just managing the data lab. I mean, that is obviously a huge job, super, super important. That is already keeping you really, really busy. And then taking on the identity and fraud business, like that's a whole nother world. What drew you to do that?
Well, a few things. One is you may not know, but my background actually for years has been in identity and fraud. I co-founded a company that did ID fraud detection about 20 years ago. Gosh, it recently was purchased by LexisNexis, I think, for $375 million. So
Whoa.
it had a lot of power in the market. Yeah. So
Oh wow.
it's part of my part of my background. I was an officer in a publicly traded company that's now part of FICO that did fraud detection around the world. It actually, their systems are used in most banks today still, and that was quite some time ago. But it's been a long time passion of mine, and I've stayed close to it. So that's one piece of it. The other thing is that I see identity and fraud at Experian as being a tremendous opportunity, and mostly because of where the world is headed, of where the kinds of data that Experian has at its disposal to leverage, as well as the kind of integration and the kind of environments that we operate in today, seems like there's a huge growth or tremendous growth opportunity there. So you know me with the data labs, I love building new things. I love the idea of the future and growth. So when I think about identity fraud and being put in a position where I can influence the growth in a very direct way, uh, that was attractive to me. So while it was very challenging for me to ever let go of these labs because they were my babies, I think of them all as my babies. Uh, Identity and frauds got me really excited. So I'm glad Experian gave me that opportunity.
Awesome. For those listening in, Eric, who aren't aware about all the things Experian is doing around identity and fraud, can you talk a little bit about the different solutions and services Experian does?
Well, today, typically, most people, though they wouldn't even know we exist in identity and fraud space. We're kind of a behind the scenes business, unlike maybe the credit reporting business where people go, oh, I know my credit report's at Experian and I see their name on the report when I read it. Um, with identity and fraud, typically, like the most common uses are when somebody applies for a loan, a credit card. There's a bit of authentication that takes place to determine whether or not the individual applying for a loan is the legitimate or authentic individual they represent themselves to be. It could be an imposter. It could be a bot if it's online. And so, Experian plays that intermediary role with our clients to do that behind the scenes vetting process or validation process. So we do that for most large banks today, and that is principally where we operate. There are other parts of our business, though, that are a bit outside of that mainstream. And so for example, when you're conducting business online in e-commerce, we're also involved in that process, doing similar types of things, validated information. The footprint of information is a little bit different, but it's the same kind of thing. We're looking at it, looking at the information provided in the shopping experience and saying, is this a real person? Is this a bot? Or is this an imposter, somebody representing that they're you when they're obviously not? Same kinds of data sets, just different environment. Um, and that's principally what we do. We do that in a lot of different ways, but that's the core of it.
What are some of the things that you're finding are really interesting about how fraudsters are pretending to be other individuals? Because I think about like as technology's been advancing, with deep fakes technology where people can replicate. It looks like Eric Haller is on a video call with me, but it's not, and people can replicate voice. So, like, what are some of the interesting things that you're seeing that as your technology is getting better, your solutions are getting better, your algorithms are getting better. At the same time, fraudsters are trying to beat you every step of the way.
Yeah, it's the environment is rapidly evolving and is actually pretty complicated when you start peeling the layers back. I think one of the areas that I'm really engaged around right now. We'll talk about deep fakes. We want to talk about deep fakes. It's a little pet passion of mine. But the one of the things that I think is something that everyone can connect to is the notion of fraud being perpetrated by bots, meaning it's a computer. It's somebody that said, you know what, I'm not going to try to go after Eric Haller individually. I'm going to try to go after 50,000 people that were engaged in a data breach. And now I've got their data, these 50,000 people or 100,000 people, and I'm going to be as smart as I can in trying to get as much money as I can out of that breach. So they use computer bots. Now, our focus right now is beyond just validating all the typical information we would and people would expect, like a name, an address, a social security number, making sure those things all work together, is looking at that electronic or invisible data behind the scenes and trying to determine whether or not it's a real person. If you can eliminate the bots, that's an easy catch. An example might be, think about when you're scrolling through your shopping cart. Hey, I want to buy now. I click buy
And
now.
people can
I'm in the
replicate.
shopping cart. Not everybody is one click and shop. Sometimes you go, okay, we want to validate where you're going to ship it to, and you validate it, and then you hit the next button, and then it goes to another screen, and they say, hey, Do you want fast shipping or slow shipping? Do you want to pay for fast shipping or not? Okay, no, I'm fine waiting for it. You click the thing to the next page. Well, a human being takes a few seconds at least to read what it is that's being asked and then scroll down and hit the next button. But a bot doesn't wait. Bot just goes bam, bam, bam. So you know it's a bot sometimes just because of how fast it's flipping through things, how quickly it says yes, how quickly it enters information. Then hey, this is not normal human speed. Something's wrong here. Um, that's the kind of I have lots of examples like that, but that is the kind of thing that we're looking for. Sometimes I'm very careful about how many examples I use, only because uh, I find this incredibly engaging and like it's fun conversation with friends and family. But sometimes these insights are how we catch the bad guys. So I'm always careful. I go, what would be pretty well known? So I'm not disclosing anything that might be part of our secret recipe. But the speed, the way things are, a mouse is moving through a screen, how pages are looked at from the time somebody enters a site to the time they get to buying something. What does that path look like? You can learn a lot about whether just binary, human or bot. If bot, bad. If human, keep going. So fraud doesn't happen that frequently. It usually happens less than 1% of the time. So 99 times out of 100, if you're going to disrupt a process because you think it might be fraud, you're impacting your customer. So you want to be really smart. So on the bot stuff, that's a pretty easy way to get a big chunk of that to the side. Imposters, which you started asking about, is a lot more challenging. And imposters, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, the behavior of an imposter. One might be looking at the kinds of information, again, the invisible kind of data you don't think about, but that is used in a transaction process. And as soon as I say this, you're going to go, well, that makes a lot of sense. You think about an IP address. You're on a network, like all three of us right now, we're using IP addresses, and that's how information is being passed back to our device right now. The internet needs to know where they're sending information. So Mike's getting information. Destiny, I am. We all have different IP addresses. Now, if you look at an IP address, often it may be associated with some device specifics, like we can pair a device just based on the information that the internet needs to know to send that information. So in this case, we're all on Chrome browsers because that's what's required here. Usually the information like what kind of browser it is, what kind of operating system it is, what kind of screen size it is, so that when an image is projected, it knows what's going to happen. In fact, in advertising on the internet, all this information is a must-have information so that they can deliver the ad to your device. So just looking at that kind of data, all of a sudden, hey, typically we see an iPad for this IP address, and now we're seeing something else, and so that might be a flag for us. Or, gosh, we typically see this amount of activity with an IP address, and we're seeing Eric Haller at 50,000 locations all at once from an IP address. That's each location may seem very normal, but if you know that there's a lot of locations being fired up all around the same time, then that's not normal. So the imposter type event, there are different ways to do it, and that is, things that you might expect would be, hey, Eric Haller just provided an address to ship some goods that he's never provided before. That could be a red flag, or it could mean that I'm shipping it to my mom or something. Those things which used to be really high importance and something we would really drill on are less and less interesting to us now. So we have to look at other data elements that point us in the direction that somebody's trying to manipulate the system. I think on my own Amazon account, I want to say there's probably like 21 addresses on my Amazon account because of friends and family that I often send things to. And see, if you want to be a friend or a family member of mine, I send
No doubt.
vodkas to the
No
people I
doubt.
work with. You won't believe what I send to family members. No, it's the but it's a very normal thing because I'm an active online shopper and I find it very easy to send things to people online, and Amazon obviously makes it super easy for us. So I'm an avid user. But that shipping address becomes less interesting even to detect an imposter. You have to be much smarter about how you're going about that.
Definitely, Eric. And I would like to talk a little bit about digital identification. I would like to know how you would define that.
Yeah. So today, or say historically, we'll start historically. Um, Identity, used to be face to face was the way you knew somebody for the most part. You walked into a store and they knew you by name and it was local, and you might even have opened up a line of credit with your local store. And over time, as things, expanded and grew, that intimate store relationship kind of dissipated. So we needed to come up with other ways to identify ourselves. So, unfortunately, we probably made some poor choices over time, but like a driver's license was often used as a form of identity. So I own and operate a vehicle, or I've been certified that I can operate a motor vehicle, and that became our identity all of a sudden, and we use that for a social security number. That was never intended to be a national identifier for things like credit and other personal information. That was a number assigned by the government for a government program. And but because everybody wound up getting that number over time, it became part of our identity. And so in the U.S., that's just part of who we are. Uh, tertiary, or sorry, terrestrial addresses, the place we live, getting less and less important. Why was it so important before? Well, because we got a lot of mail at our address. Now we get a lot of goods being shipped, so I guess that's where it's important. It's a mail drop, but in a different sense. But people also always ask, what's your address when they were trying to validate your identity. It still happens, but it's not as important as it was. Telephone number. Landlines used to be. There used to be that used to be like one of the ways to identify or locate people was from their landline, and you could call 411 and say, "Hey, I'd like to know where Eric Haller. Can I have his number? Can I have his address?" And you could do that. There used to be businesses that you'd look up an address and it would tell you their name, and all from the telephone book and how we register for telephones. So telephone number was a key part of our identity. That's all changing. And while those numbers still exist and they're still used and they still have some importance, they're not nearly as center stage as they used to be. And the kinds of things that identify us now, most people don't even think about it. They don't realize that it's going on in the background. We just talked about IP address. I think if I queried my family members and friends on what an IP address is, unless you've got a kind of a background in it, you'd probably be like, I don't know, what is an IP address? What is that? So, but that starts to play a factor. The advertising IDs on our phones, that device information. There's a lot of device information that starts to add up and create uniqueness around every device. I'm the only one that uses my mobile phone. I don't know if you guys share a mobile phone with somebody. It's usually individuals use their own phones and they don't share, and so your mobile device becomes a really strong representation of your identity in the digital world. So all these things that I'm talking about, you asked me to define digital identity. It's how we represent ourselves in that environment. How do people recognize us? And so, you know, we're going to talk probably a little bit about deep fakes. That video and audio representation of us becomes a bit more important. I don't think anybody thinks about their voice print. Very few people do anyway, as being a unique aspect of them. I think we're all being trained by our mobile devices that that all of a sudden our thumbprint or our facial recognition open up our phone feels very normal, right? That feels very normal. That's becoming part of our digital identity. So but it's the things we don't think about. I think that is it's evolving, but that is to me the most interesting aspect of the whole thing is that most people don't think about how they're being represented online, and there's a lot of information that represents us um, that we don't typically take ownership over. We don't think about it, but it's vital, absolutely vital to the whole process, even for you to get what you want.
100%. And if we were to just go into the topic of COVID-19 and just how everything has changed, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted the way that people rely on technology for digital identification?
Yeah, so I can't take credit for this because this has been work that's been going on for 4 years, and I just took over this role 6 months ago. So the our global team does research every year. They do research across thousands of consumers, hundreds of businesses in 10 countries, and they look at things like how do people feel about the internet, how do they feel about security, how do they feel about all different kinds of things. And one of the things that's happened in the pandemic that's shown up in our research is that the shift to online has happened during the pandemic, but by often or most often by people that weren't really engaged online before. I mean, there are many that were engaged online, but there are a lot of folks that shifted that really weren't big believers in the whole idea of buying goods and services online. It appears that the risk of walking into a store during COVID outweighed their fears. Their fears of walking into a store were greater than their fears of shopping online. And so we've seen a shift of about 20% of the population is moved to shopping online. And overall in our survey, the expectation is 46% of the total population believes they're going to purchase more things online next year. So it's definitely something that's happened. When stores are safe to go back in again, that population that shifted, I'm not sure how much they'll shift back, and that's a big question. Everyone's doing research and polling and trying to figure that out to assess whether or not e-commerce is going to continue on this almost straight up curve that they're on. Good probability is some will go back into the stores, but a lot will be enjoying that experience. Now, along with that, though, it's not surprising that as this population has grown, the concern around security and risk has grown as well. When you think about the people that are coming on now, they're like, I'm enjoying this, but I wasn't doing this before because I thought I was gonna lose my money from my bank account, or somebody's going to steal something and I'm going to lose out. I don't want to take that risk. Now they're doing it. They're realizing, hey, this works, but how do I know it's going to continue to work? How do I know that I'm not going to get my money stolen from me in some way? So it has shown up also in an uptick where most people, over half, are concerned about security. It's their number one thing that they think about when they're conducting business on the internet is everything secure? It's a real challenge, I think, because we are so well trained to expect a very smooth, efficient customer experience. We can blame guys like Amazon and Walmart and a lot of others for one-click purchases and recognizing me as soon as I enter the site and making things as easy as possible. I mean, I think they, and I don't mean to mark them as any kind as leaders in the market, but maybe it's a bit self-evident. I just use those sites quite a bit. and I love it. I love the convenience of it. So when you talk about security and fraud detection, inevitably during that customer journey through that experience, there are a lot of points where fraud can actually work its way into the process. And so the challenge is to continue to provide that wonderful customer experience, that efficient process that everybody loves and keeps people coming back to e-commerce, uh, while doing a really good job at looking for those bots and imposters that could disrupt the consumer's life as well as the businesses. So that's really the nexus that I'm focused on, experience focused on, is that, how to optimize that balance, and that's where I think, and Mike, you've heard me say this before. Whenever I hear the word optimize, I think of machine learning and artificial intelligence, because that is what drives AI. AI at its base is all about optimization. And so even if you get into it mathematically, it's always focused on optimization. So I uh, I think there's been plenty of opportunities for us to develop new products and services that are AI based, that are data oriented. So use a lot of the data that I'm talking about, all these data elements that are unseen, to help extract, identify fraud signals during the process, to alert our clients so that they can do a better job of managing that process for the very few exceptions that do take place.
Eric, I know that our time is almost up, but I wanted to ask you about kind of your thoughts on the future of identification in this age of deep fakes and criminals becoming more smart with how they're approaching trying to take over someone's identity. And actually, I want to throw this in too, because you like talking about deepfakes. I just saw this video, this AI that basically is like producing music for artists who no longer produce music. So they just did like a Nirvana song. This AI like was trained on all this Nirvana music, and the lyrics and the music and the beats and the tracks, and it's now making Nirvana songs, and it's amazing. Like I was listening to it and going, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. Like what an AI can produce uh, around a person. And you would think that this is actually Kurt Cobain singing this song, but it's not. And so I want to ask you, like, as like technology is getting better at replicate what someone might be doing, your thoughts on the future of identification.
Yeah, so those are the things that keep me up at night. I think it's a very impressive bit of convergence that you're describing. The So here's the thing: is AI or machine learning is evolving on many different threads. Um, one is the video part of it. So being able, the whole history of video forensic analysis is pretty long, actually. And I was just saying this the other day. If you think of, like, you watch Homeland or 24 or whatever, there's always a part in one of the shows where they go, well, we just received this video from the president of Argentina, and we need to authenticate whether it's legitimate or not. We'll have to get it to the FBI or the CIA and be able to evaluate it. And that's been something that we've been doing around the world for years. And they'll look at, like, changes in the lighting, eye blinking, the mouth movement, the demarcation
Oh,
of
interesting.
lines between a person. They'll look at the background and they'll say, does the background, is it continuous during the video? Does it change? They'll look at the congruity of the background. Hey, this is not in Argentina. This is in Jamaica or something. Like it's not a background that we would see in that place. Um, there's a lot of different aspects just from the visual counterfeiting that can take place that one would look at and validate. With deep fakes and AI, over time, it's a process called generative adversarial networks. Basically, you get one network, a neural net, that says, I'm going to make a fake video. And you have another network that operates against it and says, I'm going to detect whether or not the video is fake. And they keep building against each
Oh,
other.
interesting.
And so when the guy that says, hey, I'm building a fake video gets caught by the network that says, I caught you, then he goes, how did it catch it? I'm going to have to change what I do and make it better so it can't catch it. And so this is, they're called generative adversarial networks. They've been on the scene for about 4 years now, and they're getting better and better and better and better. USC did a test on deepfakes just a couple years ago, and said, hey, you know what? 95% of the deepfakes we can find them. You know, by doing all those kinds of things, you build a neural net, you try to detect these things, you go, hey, there's all these things that are wrong, it's scored a certain way, it's fake. Google just did a competition that ended a couple months ago. 3,000 deepfake videos, they put it out to the best researchers around the world, and they could only detect 65% of the deepfakes. So it dropped in just 2 years. So those are the things. It's going to be a constant battle, because AI is a constant battle of optimization. And that's so how the systems that you will have to create to determine whether or not something's fake is going to have to be pretty impressive. I have some working hypotheses that says a lot of this information that we're talking about with digital identity may be helpful for like bots, like looking at something that's bot oriented, something that's being orchestrated by an imposter but doing multiple people. Like there's some things that'll be not the fake related, but the source of the fake or where it's coming from that will help us. But that's just one vein. You mentioned audio. So everything from video to audio, getting a person's voice replicated is also challenging in very different ways. The tonality, the pausing between phrases. Like everybody jokes about like William Shatner and how he says like one word at a time. You know, kind of like he's very that's it's just an old joke. Star Trek, if you're Trekkie. But I think everyone has their own characteristics, and if you have a familiarity with the person, you can typically auditorially detect that something is inaccurate. But that is getting better over time as well. And then you have, I'll call that the one-way deep fake, right? You're viewing something. It could be simulating or trying to replicate a politician or somebody famous, and you're trying to figure out, is that real or not? That is getting better and better and better. Just over the next couple years, you're not going to be able to tell unless you have some tools to help you. But that's not what keeps me up at night. What keeps me up at night is what I think will be the wave after that. And the wave after that is more around, you look at things that like OpenAI is doing. It's another Elon Musk company. Microsoft's put $1 billion into them. And they have a set of algorithms they refer to as GPT-3. It's natural language processing. And that's when, I thought where you might be going, and I wasn't sure if you were or not, that you thought the songs were written by Nirvana. But it was AI that wrote the songs. And actually, like my daughter experiments with it. My daughter's a data scientist, so she experiments with these things all the time. She's very into this. But being able to replicate what people might say based on all the corpus of information that you have on an individual, so that they can start to speak, they sound like you, and they may actually put words together that sound like you, and then when you ask them a question, they respond like you. That, and then there's another, we talk about technology convergence, so that's the area in natural language processing, and then there's another area of deep learning. So deep fakes, when I talk about GANs, and that's all deep learning. But there was some work done by Facebook that got shut down about 3 years ago, when they were trying to train a deep learning network, two servers, basically two different networks, kind of like a GAN, but I don't think it was, to negotiate with each other. Negotiation makes me nervous, because negotiation in a wrong way is manipulation or persuasion. So I grimaced when I saw that. I think it's in some ways there's probably some good that comes out of negotiating. You play war games, or somebody's, hey, I got to go into negotiations one country with another. Let me role play it with the AI system, and it'll help me come to the best conclusion. But these are computers that can eventually do this with individuals, and so you start marrying the art of negotiation with audio, with video, um, and now you got a really big problem. So these are things that, like in the labs, this is not a ID and fraud business kind of challenge, because it's going to be years before we get there. But you asked me about the future. I think the future uh, could be very problematic unless we are very smart about how we learn to detect and contain that kind of activity.
I think you'll find it interesting. It was I'll send you the Nirvana one and then the Amy Winehouse one, because it's actually also creating the lyrics as well. So it's automating the music, the lyrics, and it sounds like an Amy Winehouse song, but she didn't write it. Obviously, she didn't sing it, but it sounds like it based on this very very smart AI. The way it was able to develop it, it's fascinating. And actually, as you're talking about deepfakes, I yeah, I'll send it over to you. There was another one, like, what also, as you're talking, I'm like, other things that concern me around deepfakes is like, as the AI is like making mistakes like a human would, like, oh, Mike stutters a lot, so it stutters naturally, so it makes it seem like it is Mike. I watched this deep fake of Tupac Shakur rapping, and it wasn't him, but it was him on stage, and it showed like beads of sweat coming down during certain parts of the song to make it look like he was energized. And I was like, wow, that absolutely amazes me. Like the technology to make it seem so real and in the moment. Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, usually, at this stage, in case anybody's listening, and hopefully I didn't freak anybody out, but if anyone's listening and thinking about this, right now, it takes a tremendous amount of observations to get a deep fake right. Hours and hours of training on an individual, which means there's got to be lots of video, lots of audio, um, and it takes a lot of computer power. So if you think about it, these things that we're seeing take a lot of time and focus to produce. Basically, they're producing some. It's almost like a video production. Um, it will be a while before we see this, happening on people like you and me. It's going to be a long time. Because there's just, even though there is a proliferation of individual content online, maybe through TikTok or YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, excuse me, there's not enough yet. And so, those of us who have we'll say, stronger or larger than normal uh, footprint online that's accessible to those who want to perpetrate harm, that's where the risk may be over time. But it's not going to be easy. I mean, I do believe that these technologies do evolve over time, and it'll become easier, and it'll be faster, and it'll be cheaper, and it'll take less work, and all those things, because that's what happens in tech. But it will take a while to get there. I just want to make sure that Experian is savvy enough that we're leading the charge in detecting these things, such that when it does get to that point, folks will look to us to help.
No doubt. Well, Eric, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on the podcast. For those that want to connect with you or follow you online, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn. If I'm doing something interesting, we usually post it on LinkedIn. Let folks see it there.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eric. All right.
Pleasure as always.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Data Talk podcast. We share new shows every week, and you can find the full catalog of previous episodes, including YouTube videos, on our Experian news blog. You can get access to the full catalog by going to experian.com/datatalk. And we always love hearing from our community, so if you have any comments or suggestions for future shows or guests you'd like to hear from, please let us know. You can leave a comment on iTunes, or you can reach out to us on Twitter @Experian DataLab. You can also email me directly My email is michael.delgado@experian.com. Take care, and we'll chat next week.